Hello and welcome again to my channel. It's Larson Hicks. Good to have you here. Today I wanted to real quick respond to a comment I got on a video. It's amazing. I got a comment on a video. It's exciting stuff. So it was on a video I recorded back in October called "Young Men Take Risks or Burn Out." I'll put a link in the comments or in the description below. But here's the quote that was given that was left, or the comment that was left. It was from Checkup, and he said that he finds it frustrating that the modern church has failed to inspire men to action, both professionally and romantically, and wanted to hear my thoughts on the balance between contentment with where God has you and pushing to achieve more. And he gave an example. I don't have any passion for my job/work, but instead of taking action, I'll stay in contentment with where God has me. Great question, interesting topic. And yes, I think that video about taking risks or burning out definitely addresses that in part, but it also leaves a lot. So I won't rehash what I talk about in that video, but just to summarize that video, I'm really talking about how if you're a young man especially, you need to be pursuing your calling. You need to be pursuing discovering your calling, and that means you have to take risks. That means you have to try new things, and if you don't, you are going to burn out, and you are going to find yourself 20, 30 years down the road in a job that you don't like and that you are not good at, and are wishing you had another option, but you don't. So check out that video for more on that. But just a quick couple thoughts on this topic specifically. For one, I just say, you definitely shouldn't stay in a job that you don't like indefinitely. There's obviously seasons where you are pursuing a goal, and there's a job, there's a phase that you have where you've got to do something difficult and have a job that you don't enjoy for a season, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially when you're young, right? When I was young, newlywed, I delivered papers in the morning from 4 a.m. to 6 a.m. Before my second job at a factory. And neither of those things were jobs that I loved or thought were really important, but they were important. They paid my rent and they paid for our groceries when I was a newlywed. One of I really enjoy, I'm going to put a quote up here. This is Mike Rowe, talks about how you should never follow your passion, but you should always bring it with you. So I love that quote because I think it gets to something important. We're kind of obsessed with this idea of it's this lie in just in general in the modern. We talked about this in the Rich Lusk video last week about the therapeutic turn, and how the goal in life right now in this day and age is to be happy and to follow your heart. And of course, that's not good advice. That's not biblical advice. And it's not good career advice either. It's not about following your passion or interpreting that to mean do whatever makes you happy for a living, and quit your job if it doesn't make you happy. And go find something else. I do think the long-term goal for us should be to find the thing that you can do with your life and your career that you are best suited to, that you're good at. I mean, doing things well is fun. It's really frustrating to do things poorly, and you may be doing things poorly because it's a job that you're just not good at. Like you're a surgeon and you hate blood, or you have really shaky hands or something. That would not be a fun job. Because you're not good at it, right? Being a mechanic who is terrible with their hands, right? That's not a good fit. And so I think you need to have the self-awareness to regardless of whether or not you think the job is cool or fun or will look good on a resume, um, have the self-awareness to realize, hey, I'm bad at this. This isn't where I should stay. I should continue to learn in my career what things I'm good at and what things I'm not good at. Okay, pulling back down the Mike Rowe quote. I will say, just as a side note, and I'll put a link in the description, but there's this book. I did a book study, was in a book study on this book, Rescuing Ambition by Dave Harvey. And I can't really speak to what the book said, except that I know that it was Doug Wilson who led the class, and he thought the book was great. And I do remember walking away from that book study having learned a lot of things. So check out this book if you're wanting to kind of do further reading. It's highly recommended by a lot of different people that I respect. But yeah, so ambition, generally speaking, is not a bad thing, and I don't think we should. I do think that in the church we've taken it to be a bad thing. We've taken it to any ambition, any desire for upward mobility, for making more money, for having a better career. All of that stuff is just worldliness, and we should avoid it. And I've said, like, I've got an exhortation I gave our church a couple weeks ago about the American dream and how the American dream in a lot of ways is a lie. In my interview with Joffrey Swait, if you don't follow Joffrey the Giant, go check out his channel. And we had an interview where I talked about nobility and class, and there is something wonderful about knowing your station, knowing where God has placed you, and being content with that. So there is a tension here, absolutely, and the ditch on one side of the road is that you're an American, and by golly, it's your right, it's your God-given right to be whatever you want to be, regardless of anything. You need to just pursue whatever it is you want. I think that's a lie, and that's a ditch on one side of the road. But on the other side, it's, hey, this world's going to burn. Doesn't really matter what happens here. All that matters is you're saved and you help other people get saved. And really, if you're ambitious for money or for success in your career, then that's really a form of worldliness, and you should, and that's evil. And you should do the most humble work you can do. And that's not good either, right? So I think there is a middle path here, or a third way. And one quote that I think from Scripture that I think is interesting is the parable of the talents, right? I've got it pulled up here from Matthew 25, and I think what's interesting here is the fact that the servant who buried his talent, the master calls wicked and slothful. So he's not happy with that servant. So I think, and this is a story about money, and I don't think it's like simply an analogy for something else or something more important. It is a parable, of course, and so there's layers and to the meaning, but I don't think he's saying, to whom much is given, much will be required, and that's where we get that quote from this passage, this parable. And so God does expect us to turn a profit on the gifts He gives us, and that includes our money, that includes our actual talents, the things that He's given us the intellectual or physical capability to do. And He's pleased with the servant who goes out and risks it, who tries to turn a profit, tries to get a return on what he's been entrusted with. And so it is a sin. I think it's a great sin to bury your talent in the name of contentment and in the name of not being worldly. So that's one aspect. The other thing I'll mention is that I think this is such an interesting story from the parable of the wedding feast, where Jesus is talking about being invited to a wedding, and he says, don't sit at the place of honor, lest someone more distinguished than you is invited. He says, but when you're invited, go to the lowest place. And when your host comes up, he'll say, friend, move higher. And then you'll be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table. So what I think is interesting about this story is, and he's saying, for everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and everyone who humbles himself will be exalted. What Jesus isn't saying here, and I think the wrong application that we make all the time, is that Jesus is saying you shouldn't want to sit at the head of the table. That's wrong. That's evil. You should want to sit at the very bottom. Actually, he's not saying that. If you look at it again, he's basically saying, here's a trick for getting to the top. I am God. I am the king. If you go back to the conversation I had with Pastor Lusk last week, the Proverbs are these moral. He calls them moral cause and effects. He basically, it's a king speaking to his son, who's a prince, and preparing him for kingship, and he's explaining to him this kind of the secret principles, the secret properties of the world, and how to live and operate in this world and be successful. And here we have Jesus doing that very thing, where he's saying, you've got it wrong. When you strive, when you exalt yourself, you always get humbled. If you want to be exalted, you've got to start by humbling yourself. You've got to serve. You've got to start at the bottom. You've got to not think more highly of yourself than you ought. And so I think it's interesting because it's a different way of looking at this, I think, than we're used to. That Jesus isn't saying don't sit at the head of the table. You shouldn't want to. He's actually, the whole point of the story is, how do I get to the head of the table? Well, let me, in God's kingdom, the way that Jesus made the world, you start at the bottom. You humble yourself. You serve. You die first, and then you're exalted. Right, the way that Jesus was. So, back to the question at hand. It's about this tension between contentment and ambition. And so I'll just to kind of get into contentment. I think Philippians 4 is one of the best verses on this topic of contentment. And it's funny because the quote we all know from Philippians 13, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. It's athletes' favorite verse. I think they usually it's interpreted as I can win all sports games through Christ who strengthens me, and it's used as this kind of like, I don't know, this almost like this mantra or this name it and claim it kind of verse that you can do anything you want to do. It's sort of like we baptize our American dream or whatever ambition with this verse. But when you zoom out, I mean, the context is pretty important. He's actually talking about how he has been in need. He's been able to be brought low, and how in every circumstance he's learned how to be content, even when he's out of money, when he's facing plenty and hunger, and when he's in abundance and in need. So it's like there's these different circumstances, and Paul's been through all of them, and he's learned how it is to be content. And it's, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. I think what Paul is talking about here is really important, and it's about I think it's about not being fazed by the different hands that God deals us at different times in our life, and it also is about being not being a man pleaser. He's basically saying it's Christ who strengthens you. It's not other people. It's not even the food that you have or lack thereof that strengthens you. It's Christ. It's Christ Jesus who strengthens you. And if you abide in him, if you live coram Deo, if you live before the face of God, then you can stand up straight and be content and not fazed by whatever it is you go through. I I had an experience in my career once, where I'd been in this job for a long time, and my numbers, I was responsible for a number, and my number didn't turn out to be as good as I wanted it to be, or my boss wanted it to be. And I remember there being a moment where I thought I was in trouble, and I came home and told my wife, I think my boss might be about to fire me. He didn't seem very happy about my number. Um, but then I talked through it with my wife and said, I did what I thought was best. I executed on a strategy that I thought was going to work and was going to pay off, and it did in one sense, but it didn't on the number that my boss wanted it to. And that was a risk I took, but it was a risk I took strategically, and God knows. I mean, this was the key thing: was God knows what I did. God knows how hard I worked. God knows um, that I really did put in the effort. And I'm not saying I didn't make mistakes, and that I shouldn't bear the consequences of the mistakes I made. But I also know that God knows what I did, and I'm not guilty. I don't feel that there's sin that I have to confess here, even if I lose my job. And if my boss fires me, he fires me for whatever reason, and I don't think it's unjust for him to fire me. But my wife and I prayed, and that was really her advice to me was, God knows what you did, right? God saw the work you did, and it was such a comfort to me in that moment where I'm sitting there, and you probably know the feeling, if you've ever been in the situation of just intense anxiety, this feeling in the pit of your stomach, this tingling, that I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight because I'm thinking about the fact that my boss is upset with me. And my wife brought me back to earth with but doesn't God know what you did? And she was dead right. And we were able to sit there and pray and say, God, we're going to trust you on this. You know what I did. You know if my work was appropriate or not. And we'll trust you. And I was able to sleep like a baby that night and to put it behind me. And again, coming back to Philippians, that's what this whole chapter is about. Philippians 4. It starts with this: rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I say rejoice. Let your reasonableness be known to everyone. The Lord is at hand. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. This is the way we're supposed to live, and this is the secret of contentment, and the secret of avoiding anxiety. Is live coram Deo, live in a way that you have a clear conscience about what you're doing day to day before God, and submit everything to Him in prayer, and you can rest and be content. So just to kind of wrap this up, and again, the question from Checkup was about this middle road, this balance between contentment and ambition. I don't have passion for my job. Should I just stay though? Be content. My answer is you can be content in anything, in any situation. Be the kind of man who is content in any kind of situation because you're living coram Deo. But don't be a man pleaser. Be a God pleaser. Be somebody who lives before God and wants to make Him happy. If we are to, all through the Old Testament, you see God requiring from His people a sacrifices, and over and over, it's the first fruits. It's the firstborn, the lamb without blemish. He wants our best, and we're told, we're given all of these very specific examples of, this is what I want. I want your best. I want your first fruits. And we tithe 10%, but it's not because it's only 10% God's and 90% ours. We tithe 10% because it's 100% God's, and And it's a symbol, it's a token of the fact that this is all yours. This all comes from you, and here's 10%, because this is what you asked, but it's all yours. Um, but we're told in the Old Testament that the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart. Oh God, I will not despise. And we're told that over and over. The prophets talk about it, that what He really wants, more than circumcision, is a circumcised heart. He's after your heart, and then of course in the New Testament in Romans 12 we're told to take up our cross daily, and to offer ourselves up as a living sacrifice. And so if God wants our first fruit, He wants our best, and it's really about our heart, and it's really about our lives, and we're told in the New Testament to offer ourselves as a living sacrifice. Then how can we not be ambitious to offer to God the very best we can, right? And this is where this idea of doing things in an excellent way really matters, because your life is an offering. You are a living sacrifice, and your laziness, your lack of ambition, is a lack of zeal for God. It's a lack of you think about think about having a king and him sending you out to be a representative of his, or to go out and accomplish some mission for him and bring back something for him, and the idea that you would go out and just lollygag and kind of drag your feet, and should be abhorrent. If you've read your fairy tales and your King Arthur stories, you should, the idea that you would go out and do anything but throw yourself into it, back to the Mike Rowe quote, to the idea of not bringing your passion to whatever it is, whatever task it is your king has set before you, should feel wrong, should not feel right. And so that's what ambition to me is ultimately. It's this zeal for our God, zeal to bring Him honor, zeal to offer Him our best, and it's also this, the contentment part is this confidence that God sees, God knows, whether it looks impressive to men around me or not. God knows. I delivered papers, right? I hired a guy who was delivering pizzas. And in fact, I hired him because he was delivering pizzas. I was impressed with his humility and his willingness. He was going through a tough time, and he said, I'm not too good to go out and deliver pizzas to provide for my family during this time, this tough time. And now, by the way, we just celebrated his last day because he's started his own business that's taken off, and he's got employees, right? So this is the principle that Jesus gave us, that if you want to be placed in a seat of honor, humble yourself, sit at the foot. And so that's where some of the contentment comes. That's where having the self-confidence to be willing to deliver papers or deliver pizzas or do some job that's not very glorious, but doing it to please God, out of obedience to Him, for in the situation that He's put you in. So anyway, I will stop there. I feel like there's more to be said there, but I hope that checkup, the gentleman who asked the question, I hope that helps address some of your questions. Feel free to leave more comments, ask more questions. Thanks for tuning in. I hope this was helpful, and have a great day. Cheers.